Hello and welcome. My name is Nate Cap, and thank you for your time and your attention. This presentation is a follow-up demonstration to my Earth Brain and the corresponding symbolism presentation that I gave back in 2018 at the S.E.E.D 3 event. So hopefully you've had a chance to do some review on the topics that I covered in that presentation, so that way you'll be better equipped for this presentation that I'm giving today. Okay, so it's a very necessary prerequisite, and really so is the whole Cubbyhole podcast. So if you haven't got a chance to listen or study either one of those, I definitely recommend that you do so once you've seen this demonstration here today. Okay, so before I go any further, I want to give a big thank you to Brandon Martin and the whole S.E.E.D team for getting this amazing event all together and giving me and everybody else such a wonderful opportunity to get together in this web conference for such a very powerful, high frequency gathering. And it really, truly is an honor to be part of this. And this is my fifth conference that I have been part of so far, and it just keeps getting better and better. And I really deeply appreciate it. And I really deeply appreciate all the speakers as well. You know, I know how hard it is to not only learn this information and understand it, but then be able to have the courage to put it out into, the web for other people to hear. And, it's very difficult to learn all the tech and just, having the energy and the time. It takes a lot, but, it really shows how much people truly care. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that there really is no way that I can cover the whole entirety of the overarching topic that I'm going to be covering today because of the time schedule. And, I'm just happy to have the time that I do have in this conference. But just please understand that this presentation is in a very, very condensed form. And I'm just hoping to whet people's appetite and inspire the student in you to continue your own deeper research on these topics that I'm going to be sharing today. Okay, so I will be further extrapolating a lot of these topics in the Cubbyhole podcast as well. Okay, so in this presentation, I'm not going to be sharing anything truly new, but it probably will be new to your experience. Okay, it's about becoming conscious of what already is. Okay, what already is in nature or reality or the universe, but, with more clarity and more of an understanding. Now, what I really want to get to the heart of in this presentation is, how to truly symbolically trace out and orient the mind and the heart and the soul and the connection to Earth and why it must be done. Okay, so it's a huge spiritual bridge that helps us learn who we are and also fills in the gap between our minds and our hearts. Okay, because it's about dissolving the divide in the world. It's about learning that we're in a dualistic mindset. We're having a war in our mind, and if we can dissolve the divide within, we can project that through manifestation into the world. We can, inspire others. And that's what this whole presentation really is all about. Okay, it is an unfolding science of natural law as well. Okay, and, learning natural law, that is part of, bridging that divide and bridging the gap in that divide within. Now, what I'm going to be putting on the table today is I'm going to talk about the sacred trace, what that's all about. Basically, it's going to be all through the whole presentation. And then I'm going to talk about geometry and sacred geometry, especially. And I'm also going to be talking about the tracing boards, especially one particular tracing board that can help us understand mental orientation and mental disorientation a lot better. Something that everybody should really pay attention to a lot more. And also, I'm going to talk about alchemy, basically through the whole presentation as well. And the spiritual bridge masonry, something I refer to as helping us be able to, go back into antiquity, especially going back to the stellar mythology, the ancient Egyptian stellar mythology, and much further than that. But the stellar mythology is very, very important to understand, especially dealing with Horus, Set, and Shu, which I'm going to get into, and also the Great Pyramids and the destruction of the sacred feminine and the Egyptian string trick, which is really cool. I think a lot of people will really like that. So definitely stay through the whole presentation and you will definitely see something very beautiful with that revelation. And also the Egyptian goddess Ma'at, how important that figure is in understanding natural law or morality. And also, I'm going to get into the symbol of the number 7. Okay, so there's a lot to cover in a short amount of time, and I am going to be moving through a lot of this material pretty quickly. So just really try to stay with me, okay? Now, this is what I'm going to be building my presentation off of, which is Earthbrain 1 and the corresponding symbolism, which I kind of already just mentioned earlier. So hopefully you've had a chance to check this out and do some review. Now I'm going to just jump right into the material. The sacred trace is so important to understanding everything if we're going to really go back into antiquity to understand our origins and understand why things are the way they are, okay, within ourselves and in the world. So the word sacred has a few meanings that we really need to familiarize ourselves with. And the first meaning says regarded with respect. So this is about something that deserves attention and deep observation. That's what people really need to remember about sacred, okay? So it also means holy, which is, this is about something being pure or whole, something grand, something that can't be corrupted or hasn't been corrupted. And then, think about the circle, just the perfect, circle. The circle can be holy, pun intended. Sacred can also mean connected with or to the creator or, connection with intelligence of the universe. It's about something being connected to all of us or all that is or all life. And sacred can also mean worthy of veneration, which is really all about having the highest form of respect or reverence for something so powerful and so pure, especially something natural in nature, like a force of a wave or thunder or lightning or sunlight or sun warmth or the stars. The list goes on. Now, trace, and that's all dealing with elemental powers, okay? Now, trace means to follow in the sense of a course. So to follow or pursue through a process or sequence. It also means a track or search, which means to observe or investigate or trace the footsteps of something, to track something out. Trace also means to make an outline of something, indicating that something can be discovered through enough evidence or gathering eclectic data or information. And trace figuratively means to ponder or investigate. So in other words, this means to contemplate or think about on, what has been researched or collected. So the sacred trace means to investigate and outline that which is holy. Okay? So to search and observe and follow back to something pure and whole. Basically, to distill information into a big picture of connection and understanding. It's about getting back to pure forms, which helps us arrive closer to source and be able to connect the dots. Now, when I was a child, I used to sometimes get a picture of an animal or a cartoon character, and I would take a thin sheet of paper and I would begin to trace the image out. And this was something that I was told many times, that this was a form of cheating, and it is to some degree, if that's what you rely on in order to learn how to draw or express. But the way that I looked at it when I got older was, I realized that it was an action of tracing something out in order to understand the form and the idea behind it, and it would expedite the process, because then once I traced it out, I realized that later, after I had traced it out, my memory helped me be able to draw the same thing and not have to even look at the image, so I could do the whole image without even looking at it. Okay, and that's about burning the image into the mind, burning the information into the mind. So that's why tracing in all its forms is so important. Even when someone's speaking, talking, trying to mimic what people say can actually help us understand them and what they're saying even more, right? Or, when, in a book, the same thing, if you read out loud, that can actually help you understand what it is that you're reading. When somebody is asking a question, and for you, if you don't know how to answer the question right away, sometimes it's better to say or ask the question out loud, ask their question out loud. So that way, not only it gives you time to think about it, but also you hear what they're saying with more clarity, and then you're able to respond better. So tracing is just such a important thing all across the board in every aspect, if we're trying to learn, right, and trying to understand. So we trace in order to learn and understand. And to trace upon something like the flower of life is to trace out creation in order to not only communicate with source or nature, but to learn and understand the self and nature herself a lot better. So it's about, raising consciousness. So we trace in order to understand and appreciate the design of the universe and how to operate within it. And in the mystery tradition of Freemasonry, especially esoteric Freemasonry, this is called tracing upon the trestle. And I'm going to get into that. Now, being a spiritual detective and investigator is what this is all about. Okay, it's the gift of being able to trace out the truth of self, or just the self in general. Okay, so it's about tracing the inner being in order to understand what's really going on in the self and in the world that the self operates in. Okay, so one thing that can really help us understand this sacred trace a lot further is what I refer to as the spire path. And this is something that I broke down in my Oculus presentation at the Funnel 3 Trivium conference earlier this year. But just as a quick reminder, the spire path is it's a method in which one uses knowledge of the point within a circle and spiral symbol in conjunction with each other in order to correspond and understand the unfolding path of natural law and truth. Okay, so if we really want to understand what the point of all this truly is, then this is what we must understand. Okay, symbolically, of course. And it will definitely help us understand this presentation too. So definitely make sure to check this presentation out if you haven't done so already. And it's definitely worth going back to do some studying, so that way you can really understand that this is a vital key to all the mysteries. Okay. Now, I think it's also really important to understand this word retrace, which means to trace back to a source, or to get back over, or to go back over, or to go over or along again, often in a reverse direction. Okay, so think about this spiritually as a spiritual investigator. Okay, so it's about going back into antiquity to understand the origins, so that way we can understand where things may have went wrong or may have evolved. Okay, so it's really, and that is about understanding the self. Okay, so for hundreds of thousands of years, the irrepressible moral man of antiquity has preserved knowledge of self in symbol for progeny and posterity, for future generations to have a chance, to have a fighting chance in evolution. And this was done as the greatest form, the greatest act of agape, the highest form of love. And through many corrupt, passed down rituals, rites, stories, sciences, arts, and traditions, modern man has struggled to find his way back to balance and harmony due to an overwhelming and alarming amount of ignorance, negligence, and apathy. So let's not do that anymore. Let's get back to caring and retracing ourselves, so that way we don't keep making the same mistake over and over and over. Okay, and get back to preserving information. Very important information, of course. Not, knowledge of self. Now, one of the most important ways to put the pieces back together and actually restore care is to basically rebuild the sacred bridge back to our origins and, what's really taking place in our world now. And we can do this through geometry, okay, especially sacred geometry. But we really need to understand this word geometry and where it comes from. And it comes from the Greek ge, meaning earth or land, and metria, meaning, metria, meaning a measure of. And ge or geo also means Gaia, as in Mother Earth. So geometry means earthly measurement. Okay, that is very, very important to understand. And this may seem a little overwhelming in our mind at first, but it's a very, very important correspondence to the human brain, especially. And this is something that we're going to understand as we move forward in this presentation. Now, Plato, from way back in the ancient Greasy days, he said that let no one ignorant of geometry enter right outside the doorstep of the lodge that he was part of at his time. And this quote is really just an allegory, okay? Because if we really truly read between the lines, this message is really just saying that anyone who willfully chooses to ignore the geometry or sacred geometry or symbols, they can't truly enter within the self without understanding the esoteric or the occult, okay? The inner and the hidden, okay? They can't truly begin to see for themselves what is really taking place within themselves and the world that they operate without understanding this. So these people are actually referred to as the unbegun or the uninitiated, and that's who he is actually talking to. Okay, in nature, that's true. So geometry, and especially sacred geometry, is very, very important and necessary to understanding the esoteric or occult sciences. Okay, so that's very, very important to understand. So what is sacred geometry? Well, sacred geometry is essentially the holy blueprint of creation, and it's the genesis and the origin of all form. Sacred geometry is considered an ancient science that explores and explains the energy patterns that create and unify all things, and it reveals the precise way that the energy of creation organizes itself. And this is something that we can see in cymatics. But it is said that every natural pattern of growth or movement comes back to one or more geometric shapes, because this is about helping us, it's about teaching us that we must get back to pure forms, and we can understand this through symbols and even numbers as symbols. Okay, and this is what's going to help us get closer to source, back to the one. So think about that. Now, geometry is the universal language, and it is discovered and used by man to connect and communicate with the intelligent fabric of the universe. It is a non-man-made system built within nature that allows man to discover the self and reunite with true sovereignty. Now, one of geometry's greatest known explorers was Pythagoras. And Pythagoras definitely should be mentioned when talking about geometry or sacred geometry. He's definitely somebody who we definitely need to pay attention to when trying to understand the times of Greece with geometry. So the Pythagoreans, the students of Pythagoras, they were early monotheists that defined God numerically as the monad, or the one that is everything. They believed the universe is ordered by the monad in a geometrically precise manner, a belief which was adopted as a cornerstone of Freemasonry. And this cornerstone is something I'm going to talk about as we move forward. It's very, very important. And this resulted in one of the church's many conflicts with the craft. And the church was adamant that the universe was ordered by faith, not by geometry or reason. And, this is talking about the Vatican or the Catholic Church, of course, because, they don't want people to actually think for themselves and use logic or reason, or, they don't want anyone to actually see their true connection to the universe, because then that means that the church would lose its power and, people would actually be more free, and there wouldn't be so much, war and conflict in the world. But, that's only a piece of the whole puzzle of war. Now, sacred geometry is interlaced in the mystery traditions, and the mystery traditions are evidence. They are a trace of sacred geometry left behind as a preserved landmark in symbolic form, which is used for recovering the science of the mysteries. Okay, the mysteries being the story of the self. Okay, this sacred trace can be revealed using esoteric Freemasonry, esoteric Kabbalah, and or esoteric tarot. Okay, so we really have to understand that these traditions in their esoteric form, that's where we're really going to find the true beauty and the true connection. So these mystery traditions allow man to trace out the Creator's universal communication design. They are advanced tools for the spiritual technologies used to unveil the soul. And, when I'm talking about spiritual technologies, I'm talking about things like, the Hermetic principles or green language or retrospect and so on. Now, esoteric Freemasonry is essentially geometry. And in the modern instructions, geometry is said to be the basis on which the superstructure of Freemasonry is erected. It is synonymous with Freemasonry. And I just want to say that anybody who is demonizing Freemasonry, I want you to really, really take a step back and really think about that, because obviously, the fraternities, the lodges, they're very corrupt in our modern world. Okay. And so we have to understand that. But the sciences the symbols, the allegories, the stories, the geometry, that's all part of Freemasonry, especially esoteric Freemasonry. You're going to have to get past the demonization and see the math, okay? Because if you don't see the math, if you don't see the symbols and the geometry in Freemasonry, then you're going to stay ignorant of truth, period. Because this tool of Freemasonry is going to help us get back to origins. It's going to help us understand the ancient Egyptian sciences. I don't see any other way to be able to understand those without Freemasonry, because they are Freemasonry truly in its truest form. Okay, so we really got to get past this witch hunt that a lot of people are on. And, because if you're going to throw out the whole baby with the bathwater, that I definitely do not recommend that. You are going to make one of the biggest mistakes of your life if you do so. So in the later part of the 14th century, the constitutions of Freemasonry are called the constitutions of the art of geometry, according to Euclid, another name that you should familiarize yourself with when it comes to geometry or sacred geometry. And Euclid's 47th proposition is part of understanding. It is the cornerstone of Freemasonry, something that I'm going to get into a little later, but it is very important with understanding who we truly are, especially dealing with the triune brain. Okay, so geometry is an ancient Cometian science, and Cometian is Kemet. Okay, Cometian is Kemet. Cometian means Egyptian. It's an Egyptian science which is synonymous with speculative and operative masonry. Okay, so it's interlaced in everything. It's about understanding the esoteric geometry and the exoteric geometry. Those are synonymous with esoteric Freemasonry and exoteric Freemasonry. Okay, so I want to make that very clear. And these are what's called tracing boards, or you can also call them trestle boards. The trestle is more of the archetype, and then the tracing is about the action of tracing out your soul. Okay, but they're also called lodge boards too, the spiritual lodge, of course. But starting on the left, you see the entered apprentice tracing board, the first degree, and then in the middle, this is the past fellowcraft degree, and this is the middle degree. So everything dealing with the middle in the soul, that's where you're going to find that information. And then, the raised Master Mason degree, the third degree. This is very, very beautiful science, all three of these, and they all go together very well. And this is the art of Josiah Bowring, who was such an excellent, I don't even know if that's the right word to say, because I look at these boards as just, way more than just art and science. They are one of the most beautiful correspondence pieces of art that I have ever used to understanding who I am, and understanding who we truly are, and what's really going on in this world. And yeah, Josiah Bowring is a master Masonic artist, and I definitely recommend studying these boards because they are going to help us trace ourselves out. That's what they're meant for. And yeah, they can be used for evil. Absolutely, they can. Okay, but the thing is it's a science. The symbols themselves are not evil inherently, and they're not good inherently. They just are, and they can help us understand things. This is a bridge science right here, and we're going to see how that works as I move forward. Now, this is the mystery tradition that I'm going to be using mostly, especially this board, okay? And this is what's going to help us understand the sacred science of the earth brain in correspondence to our human brain, okay? It is a very helpful, useful tool to recovering much of what has been lost since the early stellar mythologies, okay? or the stellar mythos. So this is the first degree tracing board of esoteric Freemasonry. And this is the initiation degree. To be an initiation just means to start, okay? To start your journey. That's all it means. And it is Solomon's temple, the temple of the soul of man, the sun and moon, okay? And this is about a raised spirit, okay? To help find our soul and raise our spirit. So internally, this is an allegory of the self, okay? So this is the art and science of tracing out natural law and the soul. And this orientation that we see here, this is what reveals the correspondence of self to the North and the South Pole in equipoise. And it truly is a very necessary and deeply important way to trace back into remote origins of the Masonic institutions, and it's a connection to the ancient occult systems of initiation. Okay, symbols are how we're going to do this. Okay, you can get as upset about that all you want, but that's how we're going to recover so much of what has been lost in our history. That is about helping us put ourselves back together and, being more pure, be more free, because that's what purity really is freedom. Freedom is being a pure human being, and if we're a slave, then something is missing, something is wrong. Okay. The pieces are scattered. That's how we have to look at this. And we also have to look at this tracing board on its side in this orientation, which reveals the correspondence of the earth, the seasons, and the zodiac. So orientation is key. And what truly is orientation? I think that this slide right here is one of the most important pieces to resetting ourselves into nature right here, okay? Because the actual definition of orient means the direction east. It also means rising. Okay, so think about what is east and what is rising. And this is something that the ancient Egyptians definitely stored in their mythology for hundreds of thousands of years as a direction of light. So it is part of the horizon where the sun first appears, right? So the greatest tool of all, the imagination, along with the science, the knowledge, this allows one to orient the mind or direct the mind towards the thing pointed towards. It allows one to point the self into alignment with times, places, and people. So it's about orienting the mind using the imagination to place the mind in the direction of rising light. Okay? Because it's about understanding evolution. It's about knowing where east is in order to find all other directions, because east is equivalent to light. And light, especially knowledge light, is what we need in order to search in the dark with, in order to find all the other directions of the self. Okay? So we're going to learn this through the earth. Okay? The earth is what teaches us something about ourselves, because it's a correspondence. And this is all this is a very beautiful spiritual science and spiritual lesson, okay? Because this is about our connection to earth. It is one of the most beautiful, deep correspondences that anybody could ever understand, okay? Now, this is very important because orientation is everything. It is so key. Okay, and I'm going to talk a lot about orienting from here until the end of the presentation. And it is extremely important that we stay. This is where you're going to have your full attention, because orientation is everything. It's a direction. So think about direction spiritually. But this is the orientation that most of us are very familiar with, right? And the reason is because of this globe model, this map, okay? This spherical map. And I would assume that everybody listening has had one of these or seen one of these in one of their classrooms as, they went to school. And this is really important because now we're going to talk about association, orientation, indoctrination, which is essentially public education, okay? And this is very crucial to really pay very close attention to. So we really have to pay attention to the orientation that most of us have been taught, because it really has an important twist when we go further into the research and into the orientation. So we have to understand the association with the mental connection between the idea of consciousness and the poles of Earth. So it's a vital interpretation. It's vital to see the orientation, to see the association, and how we view the Earth in our minds in correspondence to our brain and consciousness. Okay, so really think about this. And I'm going to really try to explain this as thorough as possible. And it is really important that we see this way of orientation to really understand what I'm deeply explaining in this whole presentation. But there's a problem if we stay solely in this perspective or this orientation. It's not corresponding properly or in a holy way, which I'm going to explain, okay? But before I get into that, we have to understand the indoctrination of this orientation. Now, what I'm not saying, okay, really pay attention to this. What I'm not saying is that this way of thinking is completely wrong. But what I am saying is it's a portion of the whole picture, and therefore it is truly holding humanity back from being properly, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually connected to things like the moon and the sun and the stars and the planets, and especially Earth, and really each other. Okay, so one major way that we have been indoctrinated into this orientation is that for many years, hundreds of years, the public school classrooms have had a globe that, when looked at, it shows the equator going from left to right and the North Pole on top, the North Hemisphere on top, and the South Pole, the Southern Hemisphere on the bottom. Right? Now, as we see on the left with the human brain, this association and orientation is symbolically how we express the raising of consciousness. So up represents the direction to raise consciousness towards, right? Which is associated with the north direction on the globe. Okay, I want you to just keep paying attention back and forth between these. And base consciousness is associated with the downward direction. And downward is associated with what? It's associated with the southern hemisphere. So the range between low consciousness to high consciousness is gauged between up and down, or down and up. And this doesn't mean that I believe, that this is how consciousness, actually works necessarily, because consciousness is a mental expansion, which is not truly restrained to gravity or some type of direction. However, I do know that consciousness is directly symbolically measured with gravity in the sense that gravity is the material law. It's associated with material law. And raising consciousness is akin to spirituality, which is the law of levitation. It is the law of rising or raising. So it is an upward, up and down range in that way. I mean, just think about this. Think about the fact that every time we wake up from sleeping, we raise out of bed to what? To light, right? Animals raise to light from their sleep. Trees and leaves and flowers, they raise up to the sun, okay? Now, we also see that the brain hemispheres say west, and west is being left and east is being right. And this is really important when trying to understand religion, something I've talked about quite a bit in the first presentation, dealing with the three major monotheistic religions and their centralized cities that they're in. Being, Christianity is centralized in Rome, Italy. Judaism is centralized in Jerusalem, in Israel, and Islam is centralized in Mecca, Saudi Arabia. And that's why this orientation is very important to understand. Now, because we think left in association with global map, we tend to automatically associate left with west and east with right, okay? So this is really important to see and pay attention to because it creates a mind that separates the West from the East, the Eastern cultures and their religions, right? The West cultures and the East cultures and their religions. So really think about that. And as I go through more of the content, we will see how this orientation really holds up. Now, on the right side of this slide, we see the globe and all the directions that we know and understand. So if we really dive deep into the sciences of the ancient Egyptian mythos, dealing with the elemental powers, being, the nature gods or nature gods, Horus and Set, and so on, these gods are sciences to unraveling and further understanding this mystery. And it's very, very difficult without proper orientation. But the point that I want to make here is that the North is associated with masculine, which is associated with materialism. And masculine energy is centralized in the upper region, in the North, as a result of this orientation. And so subconsciously, we associate up with, you guessed it, materialism as a result. So think about that very, very deeply. And the sacred feminine is associated with the spiritual realm. And when we're in this, mentally in this downward direction in the subconscious mind, it puts the spirit, the spiritual, below the material. And that is not the right orientation. And this is associated with the southern part of the world. And again, as I move forward, we're going to see how this all starts to make sense. And remember this, I'm not demonizing anything in nature. Nothing in nature is inherently evil. We have to understand that it's all our ignorance and our associations and our orientations. And if we can, get back to alignment, that's where we're going to really start to see the beauty. So just really keep that in mind and keep these directions and associations in mind, all right? So really pay attention to the hemispheres of the earth in correspondence with the hemispheres of the brain. Now, looking at the globe that we have been brought up to observe in this orientation, let's pay attention to the latitude line, because this is what we're taught about the equator as the horizontal. Okay, we look at the equator in a horizontal way because that's how we're looking. If we're looking at the horizon, okay, that's a horizontal line. Okay, we associate, that's why horizontal has the word horizon right in it. The the horizontal, the horizontal, right? Because it's a horizon line. And yes, the word horizontal has the word Horus in it, the Horus zone. And it doesn't really make that much sense in this orientation. Okay. So we have to really pay very close attention to this latitude line. And as you have seen in this slide, I put quotations on up, left, down, and right. And we're going to really start to understand this, why I put those quotes on there as we move forward. Now, while lines of latitude run across a map west to east or east to west, the latitude indicates the north and south position of the point on Earth. So it's a divider line, which is the equator, right? So really think about this. Think about our hemispheres in correspondence to the Earth hemispheres in this orientation. It doesn't properly align, right? The reason is because the west and east parts of the world are not hemispheres necessarily, okay? Especially in regards to the poles. There's no east or west poles, right? So we have to understand that the east and western parts of the earth with respect to the sun and moon and stars, they're always seemingly moving to the right or east direction. And this is what causes our perception of the sun to come from the eastern direction, right? So this is about becoming oriented. We're trying to orient ourselves, but this orientation is very disorienting. And it's really important that we understand this condition in our mind. And here's what this orientation can really help us understand. And this is a slide from Earthbrain 1 with the 3 major religions. And this is vital to see and contemplate. We have to recognize that these 3 institutions are energy centers that correspond to our brain. Every one of us in the whole world, we're all affected by this. All 3 of these religions are Abrahamic religions and are truly everywhere in this world. But they are each mostly spread out in the religions or in the regions we see here on the map. So Christianity is mostly a Western religion. Judaism is more of a Central or Middle East religion. And Islam is more of a Eastern religion. Okay, so these institutions are very, very powerful and very influential. Okay, because they're using a lot of beautiful knowledge in their teachings. Okay, and that's what gets people pulled in. Okay, so, but we also have to understand that these institutions that are running these religions are the people who have taken part in these institutions all through history, a lot of the people have done some extremely vile and horrific things that are just a bad reflection of these religions, okay? And that's why a lot of people don't like these religions, because so many people have been massacred as a result of what these religions have done, or, the people who are associating with these religions have done. It's not the religions themselves that is the problem, though, okay? And, this is something I've stated many times, is that it's not Christianity, it's not Judaism, it's not Islam that is the real problem in our world. It's religion itself in the individual that is the real problem. It's moral relativism that is the real problem. It's also the religion that most people believe in all across the world, which is that man is the lawmaker, which is a huge, huge problem. Religion means to bind or thwart from forward progress in human evolution. And the institutions driving these major religions are teaching people to join their religion based purely on faith rather than logical learning and critical thought or questioning, especially. It's all based in fear. And it's a belief or, faith system it is a religious system. That's what a belief and faith system are. They are religious systems. But the point is to notice that on this map, north is where? It's up in our minds, which is a male dominator materialism world. And this is and also just keep in mind, this slide was this was symbolic of the world as a brain, especially the back of the brain. So I just want to make that clear. This is not how I believe the world actually looks. This is just a symbolic way of understanding or expressing the earth as a brain, and kind of, like the earth overlapping the brain, just to point out where these religions take place in the brain and on the earth. So it's a very sophisticated mental installment that keeps us collectively enslaved to man as the lawmaker, because it's all about maintaining the belief in authorities and residing in materialism. And it's about instilling the fear of some type of deity into the masses, into their minds, through institutionalized religions that are backed by lots of violence and coercion. And it's basically all social Darwinism, essentially. Okay. And let's not forget about the atheists too. Atheists, they don't need a supernatural belief system. They directly believe in man as the lawmaker. They believe man is, the highest. And whether anyone understands or believes me or not, atheism is a true religion. Why? Because it holds the self back from evolving consciousness. Okay, it's a stagnant, selfish prison that really just doesn't have real intelligence, especially with these atheists who stay atheists. These people who they're not really trying to find truth. Now, when I was younger, when I was a little teenager, I was raised Catholic. Then I became an atheist in my teens for a little while, but it was more so just because I was skeptical, and I realized my skepticism wasn't so healthy. And then I started to strengthen my skepticism, and I started to realize there's a lot more to the picture. And I wanted to be, I knew honesty was what was going to bring me to the truth. And it's a very dishonest approach to truth if someone resides or stays an atheist. I understand why people go into atheism, because religion is, especially these religious institutions, they're so visually destructive, and their beliefs in things are what make that happen. And it's very, very dangerous. So we really have to stay oriented and understand that these religions are designed, or manipulated more so, to keep us disoriented, okay, which makes for an easier slave to control, okay? So, but, also I want to make mention that, the one true religion, there is a true religion, and I personally believe that truth is the one true religion, because it is the thing, when we're honest, it is the thing that binds us to something pure, because that's what truth is. It is that which is. Okay, it's here now, and it has been. Okay, and it's not going anywhere. Now, here are some very important definitions of what being disoriented actually means. So the first definition states having lost one's sense of time, place, or identity. Okay. Well, time, place, and identity has everything to do with connection to earth, the earth brain intelligence. So just think about the orientation of location, your place on earth, and cycle measurement, being time, and your identity, which is absolutely about your alignment and internal balance as a human being. It's your oneness with the universe and the earth. Okay, so then the next definition states confused and not knowing where to go or what to do. Yeah, if you don't have direction in life and proper orientation, then of course a person in this state will be confused on what to truly do, not only with themselves, but they're not going to know where to go to truly understand their place and their connection in this world within themselves. This is why people mostly turn to religion, because they're tired and lost. They're confused. They're disoriented. Okay. And religion tends to, help people find some kind of orientation, some kind of connection. So the next definition states having lost one's sense of direction. And this is due to obfuscation of information. And this is, knowledge that has been occulted, or, let's be honest, it's most people have lost their sense of direction because they don't read, they don't research, and they don't really truly listen with their heart, their moral compass. Okay. So one of the best ways to keep the mind enslaved is to keep it disoriented. Okay. So to keep it scattered and truly ignorant to truth. And from what I have really learned in my research about the dark occult or the dark priest class, is that they will go to extreme lengths. They play things so close to the chest in order to keep people's minds in a directionless, mindless box, to keep them disoriented. And it is my humble opinion that they really don't have to even try keeping people's minds in this disorientation. Most people, they just seem to not even care at all about their master-slave relationship or what's really going on in the world or in themselves. They just don't seem to care at all. So it makes it very easy for these dominators to keep most people in a state of disorientation. And in this presentation, what I'm doing is I'm really doing my best to clear up a lot of this disorientation. Okay. It's not, it's not an easy task, but the dark ruling class has really made it very difficult to, not only be able to, gain the knowledge and find the knowledge, but also it is not easy to find the energy or the tenacity to really put all the pieces back together, because we don't have the time, we don't have the attention. Our attention is taken here and there and all over the place, and we're all working so hard every day just to put food on the table and have a roof over our head. But we have to make time. We have to sacrifice the things, our lower desires, if we really truly care to put these pieces back together. So you could look at it like the Egyptian god, the nature god Osiris, is essentially like an archetype for rememberment, because our collective soul connection to nature has been dismembered. It's been scattered all through the earth. And we must remember ourselves by reconnecting. But you can also look at it as the same thing as being disoriented. And we must reorient ourselves back to nature, back to earth. Also, just remember the word news. News is an acronym. The word news, north, east, south, and west. And what does the news do to our minds every single day, to most people's minds every single day, it scatters the information in the mind in all directions. So it's taking the mind in all directions. That's what the news does. That's what mainstream news does. So people get stuck in the news and they don't realize that their mind is being taken in all different directions. So now overlapping the human brain with the globe can help us understand the correspondence with the poles, north and south. North and south, to the left and the right hemisphere. So the equator, and this is something that, I really just want people to see now this is a different type of orientation. As you can see, the equator is vertical. So it needs to be understood in correspondence to the brain hemispheres, with the vertical line being the latitude line. So before it was a horizontal, now it's a vertical. So we have to understand both, okay? That's all I'm trying to get to. That's all I'm trying to help people see. And this is what we're not taught in public schools. And this helps us understand that east is also up, especially because it's about the alignment of, with the path of the sun, rising up, in the east, okay? Because it's about being oriented. It's about understanding that down is in alignment to the sun, going down in the west. So rising up in the east and going down in the west. So the left hemisphere becomes, or is connected with the north hemisphere, and the right hemisphere connects with the south hemisphere. And the way that we're really going to truly understand this is becoming conscious of the ancient Egyptian hero science dealing with the solar, the lunar, and the stellar cults or mythos or mythologies, especially the stellar mythos, okay? But another science that will grant us access to understanding this alignment to Earth, to the Earth brain, is something that I've covered in my last presentation, Oculus. And this is the spiritual alchemical process, which means going from darkness to light. So it's about orienting the mind. It's about starting out in the sacred feminine, okay? The aspects of consciousness, which is about beginning. It's the beginning of the journey in the circle, okay? And then working our way towards the point, or towards the central pole, which is, akin to light or law or truth, okay? So this cone symbol is a three-dimensional symbol of the point within the circle, which is what we see in the top right. And adding the spiritual symbol, the spiral that you see going from the circle to the point, this is what generates the bridge, which is, essentially just the journey of the self. That's what it represents. And this spire ritual is the ritual of life. Okay, it is the spire ritual, the spiritual. Okay, it's what I refer to as the spire path, which is about aligning to the fixed point, which is exactly what universal light or law truly is. It's natural law. It is the law that helps a human being recognize their role on planet Earth. So this is why nature will always help us find the truth if we observe and stay honest and listen very deeply, very carefully, okay? Now, I'm showing this symbol because I'm going to show how it works with both of the orientations of the planet in our mind. That's why we see that up equates to east and north, and down equates to west and south. Okay, so I'm helping preserve the knowledge in this one symbol. But up is also a direction on its own as well. So is down. Okay, so we have to understand that too. This is all about staying oriented and really paying attention to direction. All right. So staying true to the orientations and, the Hermetic principles and the aspects of consciousness, I've created this image to show the orientation of what we all have programmed into our mind, which is the cone pointing left, the horizontal. Okay. So pay attention to the horizontal going, from right to left, the south to north, which is associated with the sacred masculine. The north is associated with the sacred masculine. And then the base or oval part on the right, it's really a circle. It's supposed to be a circle, but it's about understanding it's circular. And this is associated with south, which is associated with the sacred feminine. Okay. So this is what we all have been taught. And as far as I know, and as far as I understand, it's only half of the picture. So really, I'm trying to paint a full picture here. So in the middle, the vertical, the cone going west to east, down to up, or up to down. This is what we really have to try to get people to also orient themselves with, okay? So remember what I said about the sun rising in the east, which is akin to the rising light of consciousness or enlightenment, which is up, okay? To be raised up. And of course, the sun going down in the west is akin to base consciousness and darkness. And, darkness is also associated with ignorance. That doesn't mean darkness is ultimately ignorance either. Okay, I just want to clear that up. But it's associated, it's symbolic. Because it's about being in alignment with the Earth's equator and the sun and the moon and the stars. Okay. So here, I put the globe overlapping the brain in this same orientation, with the equator being the vertical, matching the middle brain, and the middle brain is the corpus callosum. And then the point is that if we match our brain hemispheres to the Earth hemispheres, we can see our solar system much different, right? Because it's more of a balanced connection to Earth, okay? Because it's about understanding, the sun, rising through the middle and, and falling through the middle, okay? That's what we really have to use our imaginations to see, to stay oriented, okay? Now, this little animation is just to make a point with orientation of the sun, rising in the east in alignment to the equator, right up and down. And like I just said, and this orientation helps us understand a balanced rising light correspondence a lot better. Okay, so we can see that, when we align our brains or orient our minds with the hemispheres of the Earth, we can really start to see more of a symbolic way of, the rising light of consciousness within. We can see the center, okay? It's a mirror, okay? It's an occult mirror. And the ancient Egyptians, they understood this science very, very well. And I'm going to really open this up as I go further, especially dealing with the Cometian gods or elemental forces in nature, okay? Now, the danger of orienting the mind and brain west to east or east to west, what happens is the material mind, the masculine, rises over the over the spirit, over the sacred feminine, the spiritual, which is a solar doctrine, including the Abrahamic religions that I talked about earlier, which is a corruption of early the solar mythology. It's a corruption of that solar doctrine. And we are taught to look at the globe model map, and think in this way, with the top hemisphere on the top, or with the top left brain hemisphere at the top being, the left brain dominance. Okay, that's what it's associated with. So it is a condition of seeing the map the way that we have, and it's burned into our mind this way, this orientation. Okay, this is the way that we view Earth typically. So this is a control system of the solar system. It's a solar cult system. And this is something that Douglas Martin demonstrated very well in his earlier presentations dealing with the mythos. I highly recommend looking into his work. Now, on this topic. Now, here is the orientation that most people are used to regarding our solar system. So this orientation alone is half of the picture that we understand, and it keeps the human brain correspondence in a west to east or east to west modality, okay? So with, the up as north. It keeps the left brain hemisphere thinking in a dominant position because it's a correspondence. It's corresponding to the northern hemisphere, the upper region. Okay, that where we orient the northern region as the upper region. Okay, so this is why I said that the Earth brain in part 1. Earth Brain 1, that we are living in a solar cult system. We're living in a polarized, hijacked solar system with the sun in the center, right? Okay, that's how we're all taught. So the sun is solar. Okay, think about that. It is a solar matrix installment. The whole system is a solar matrix installment within our mind. But it doesn't have to be a bad thing, okay? And it's truly not in nature. The solar system is not a bad thing in nature. It's just the way that it is installed into our mind that becomes a problem, okay? Because we're swayed in a disoriented way of seeing and thinking in this system. So one way of viewing our solar system that is really powerful, if we look at it from a different perspective, is really what I'm trying to express. And hopefully this is going to help us see the parallels a lot clearer. Okay, so here we see the vertical orientation of our solar system, which is what helps us understand the correspondence of the rising and setting light to base and rising consciousness. The rising light of consciousness. So it's about orienting the brain hemispheres to the earth hemispheres, which generates a balanced perspective. Now, this is a very important slide because the ancients deeply understood the spiritual world, and they preserved beautiful sacred sciences in the mystery traditions that I talked about earlier, being, Tarot, Kabbalah, and Freemasonry. All of these traditions teach alchemy, which is all about going from dark to light, or base consciousness towards the direction of enlightenment. And the Vedic teachings of the chakra system, which we see on the right with, all the different colors and the energy centers of the body, this is what helps us understand light frequency to help us understand the original chakra system, which is made of 7 energy centers. And if we look further into the tradition of Kabbalah, then we will really start to understand our direct connection to the planets and the sun. And that's what that tradition can really help us understand. Okay, and I'm not going to get into that right now, but just understand, this is all about, and this whole model that you see on the right, this is the geocentric model, because it's about putting the green frequency right in the middle, because the middle is associated with the heart, and our heart is associated with it's green. It's the green Anahata heart chakra, and it's associated with the green of our world, the green frequency. And therefore, and think about the word heart and earth, they're an acronym of each other. Okay. So we have to really understand these models, and, even looking at the way that I oriented, Saturn at the bottom as, the base metals of alchemy going towards gold being the sun. Okay. That is very, very important to understand, because it's about understanding that Saturn is the furthest planet out, especially with the naked eye. And, this is how the ancient Egyptians understood it, as a science. Okay. So there's a lot that goes into that, but to really understand darkness and light better in consciousness, especially by orienting our mind, we can really see that light is symbolically in the direction of the celestial lights, specifically the sun and the North Pole star Polaris, okay, which is about understanding the stars that never set. Okay, so Polaris as a pole star is vital to understanding, because not only is it part of the the 7-star northern polar constellation known as Ursa Minor, or the Little Bear, but it is the star that never sets from the perspective of the northern hemisphere, which is exactly what the ancient Egyptians were venerating as the all-seeing eye, because it never went below the horizon. Okay, so it is the most northern place in the night sky that never went below the horizon. We have to really understand that, because, this is the inception of the all-seeing eye. So this star, being part of this constellation, this became what's known as the Most High in the stellar mythos some 300,000 plus years ago. So the north is associated with the left brain, which is masculine, where we, see the point of the horizontal cone pointing at the Little Bear constellation that we see on the left, the Most High. And the sacred feminine aspect is associated with the south, because it's associated with the right brain. Okay. So the north and the south together, joined by the equator and the rising sun in the east, up at the top, this represents both hemispheres in equipoise. So the rising sun symbolizes and corresponds to the raising consciousness, or, inner light, with, both hemispheres in unison. Okay. And of course, from our perspective on Earth, the sun going down in the west represents darkness and ignorance. But there's a lot more to this. And I put the bird's eye view of the pyramid to show the 4 directions, or, 4 corners of the earth. And this is how we can understand the 4 corners of the earth, because the pyramids are a directional map, okay, with the 4 directions. North is always associated with darkness, because the pyramids are in the lower northern hemisphere, okay, right above the equator. Okay, they're not below the equator, they're not on the equator, they're above the equator. And they receive the least amount of light on the north face of the, on the Great Pyramid. Now, this part is really important, because it's dealing directly with the tracing and what I refer to as the spiritual bridge masonry, okay? And I want to show where the letter, the symbol E, the capital letter E, where it not only truly originates from, but also what words have manifested from this word that really has a great connection to understanding this tracing board a lot further. And it's all about orientation. We have to pay attention to the directions of the board, okay? So as we can see, the capital letter E stands for east, it stands for equator, it stands for equal, it stands for equipoise, it stands for earth, it stands for education, it stands for Egypt, it stands for equilibrium, it stands for El, as in, the creator, the Hebrew word for creator. It also stands for the number 5, which is associated with Osiris especially, but the 5 goes very, very deep. And, that's dealing with the stellar mythos, which I'm going to get into a little bit later. It stands for erect. It stands for ether. It stands for eye. It stands for entered, as in entered apprentice. It stands for enlightenment and equinox. And it also stands for esoteric. And there's a few other words, but I just wanted to make mention of that. I won't have time to, go through all of these and explain each one and how they all correspond, but it's very beautiful when you really see how it all connects. Okay. Now, this is what I refer to as spiritual bridge masonry. A bridge is a linking pathway between two opposing sides, often separated by a void or a gap. So just think about what I just said with the hemispheres of the brain. Okay, so spiritual bridge masonry is all about building or bridging the unconscious to the conscious, or earth to heaven, or material to spirit, or internal feminine to internal masculine. Okay, so esoteric Freemasonry is the geometry or bridge that helps us understand the solar, the stellar, and the lunar mythologies that hold so much of our pure connection to source and sovereignty and essentially freedom. So it's a timeline back into our prehistoric past. Okay. Now, the stellar mythology is really, really important to break it down just so we understand what it's about. Okay, so stellar means of or pertaining to the stars. Mythology comes from the Greek mythos, meaning a narrative, a story, and logos, meaning speech, which refers to a body of stories that attempt to explain the origins and fundamental values of a given culture and the nature of the universe and humanity. Okay, so it's a body of stories told and venerated in the stars. Okay, so venerating, means to honor and respect the holiness of something. Okay, something I explained earlier. But myth is a story. It's something that is always happening and repeatedly told. And history, when we're talking about, myth, also I wanted to make mention is, when we're talking about myth and mythology, ology means the science of, or the science that is part of something. So it's a story, it's a science of the story, really. That's what a mythology really is. And it's something that is always happening and it's always repeatedly told, okay? And history is literally, it is literacy. It's something that has literally happened. So a myth is a representation of natural forces on the grounds of likeness in nature as a some type of useful archetype. So the likeness is the sameness of what is being represented. Okay, it's not exactly, but it has the sameness. It's the same when we listen to what is being described or presented. If we listen in between, okay? And once a myth is literalized, once it's romanticized or even anthropomorphized, it begins to lose its original meaning and the knowledge that is contained within the myth or within the stories, it becomes obscured, and really it will become ultimately lost if we don't, if we neglect the information and forget about it and become ignorant of it. Now, in the stellar mythos, this was the first original hero cult. And the basic reason this hero cult began was to raise consciousness into a higher type, or into an evolved being or human being. So in the beginning stages of their astro mythology, the ancient stellar Egyptians first divided the heavens into north and south, and that means that they were divinizing in the stars, the mapping of the stars, the uranography. Okay, and between the two jackals, or poles or eyes, these were the poles, the ends of the pole, right? The one pole, the axis, the axis pole. This is the straight line from the North Star or North Pole to the South Pole, okay? Or vice versa. But Set and Horus, they were born brothers. They were born twins of the great Mother Earth. So both were the first two Cometian heroes, okay? But just also keep in mind that Set was the firstborn, okay? And Set was associated with black or darkness, which came first, okay? And this is very crucial when understanding alchemy. We have to understand alchemy in this way, because darkness comes first, then comes light. But the stellar people, they venerated in the southern hemisphere first, in the southern circumpolar constellations first. And they did this around, this was a 26,000 year cycle, also known as a great year cycle, okay? And this is a precession of the equinox, something that we understand as the Earth's wobble, okay? So keep in mind that the South Pole also doesn't have a visible star like the North Pole. So that's another key point that I just wanted to make. But the primitive stellar people, supposedly they evolved somewhere south, but close to the Great Lakes of Central Africa at the beginning of the Nile River. And as they migrated north, where they realized the equinox or the equator, because, there were, two pole stars, north and south, this became the earthly mount. Okay, so just imagine standing on a mountain and being able to see the northern circumpolar constellations, the North Pole stars, and then being able to see the South Pole stars. This was considered the earthly mount. Okay, this is what we know as the equator. Okay. So this is about understanding that from their perspective at the equator, this is where the North and South Pole stars never set, especially understanding the North Pole stars, okay, because they were more visible. So looking at the two-dimensional line, it is a symbol equal to a pole with two polarities being the North Pole and the South Pole. But after realizing these pole stars, the stellar people, they venerated in both the South and North poles, dark and light, as a biune god, okay? And then, or a biune elemental power. And then from there, they migrated north, closer to the north, but not too far. And they venerated in the northern polar constellations, especially dealing with, the little bear, the Ursa Minor, the 7 stars that never set, the constellation that never set. But it was also looked at as south being the bottom and north being up, because the little bear was venerated as the most high. Okay. So the constellation having, Polaris at the center of the North Pole and migrating in a, forward direction out of the south towards the north, this indicated an upward direction. So just keep that in mind, and I'm going to really explain this a lot further as I go. Now, Shu was the third hero child of the great Mother Earth, generating the first Cometian Trinity. Okay, so this is where the Trinity comes from, or the Great Spirit, which is elemental. Okay, so he came into being when the hero cult people arrived to the equinox regions of Central Africa. So this was a place of no latitude where the pole stars were to be seen upon the horizon. This made Earth as a mount, which raised the vision of seeing the North Pole Star and the South Pole Star from the equator at the same time, which is what I just explained. Okay, so Set and Horus were elemental powers which began to have conflict with each other, being darkness and light, drought and rain, and so on. So this struggle or conflict has basically lasted all the way through all the three hero cults, solar, lunar, and stellar. Okay, so the god Shu is so important in what I explained earlier, because now we have a elemental power. We have a god, a science, part of the mythology that helps us understand what these ancient Egyptians were trying to help preserve at the equator, okay, with these poles, because Shu became the arbiter of the two brothers at the equinox, giving the northern division to Horus and the southern division to Sut or Set in the phases of, both the celestial and the terrestrial. Okay, dealing with the stars and dealing with the night sky and dealing with the earthly realm, okay? Also, a trinity wasn't really created until the elemental nature force of air or wind or breathing force, which is, the spirit. And this was divinized or expressed as a panting lion. And this panting lion was named Shu. So the lion was a zootype of Shu, okay? A zootype being an animal, okay? So an animal representation on the grounds of likeness. So this became the first trinity, which was an elemental first, okay? It was totemic. It was expressed with the nature elements. So this third hero of the stellar mythology represented raised spirit and balance and unity between the North and the South Pole. It was considered the Great Spirit, or the Great Spirit. So just to add more clarity on this elemental force or God Shu, if anybody has seen the Milky Way at night, they know that it is an enormous, beautiful arch cluster of stars, right? And if you haven't seen it, you have to go out where there isn't so much light, and you got to check it out. It's extremely beautiful. But this was venerated as the goddess Nut or Nut. Okay, so this is what Shu represents, holding up or uplifting. So Shu raises the north and the south in equipoise. Okay, so on the photo on the left, we see Shu in the night sky separating or lifting up Nut from Seb, and Seb is the god of earth. Okay, so we really have to understand, this the night sky with Shu. And then we see the figure of Shu raising the heavens from earth on the right side, upraising Nut from Seb in the day sky. So this is the equator or the equinox. Now, using the first degree tracing board again, I just want to show how using the knowledge of the North and the South poles with, this mythology and overlapping them with the knowledge of the symbol of the first primary trinity, being Sut or Set and Horus and Shu. This is the early ancient Egyptian science of self. And the modern esoteric Freemasonry, the tracing board, this is what helps us trace this science out. Okay, it truly is ancient Freemasonry. Okay, so we have to understand that these two zootypes, Horus and Set, Horus is on the left, being the white hawk of the day sky, and Set or Sut is being the black raven, the black bird of the night sky. Okay, so they associated Horus and Set with the white bird and the black bird. Okay, that's really, really important because it's about storing the information into zoo types. And they were the first two zoo types that the ancient Egyptians associated with night and day sky, okay, or black and light, or darkness and light. So the North Pole was granted to Horus, which is a masculine aspect. You know, light is masculine, okay? And the South Pole was granted to Set, which is the feminine, the South Hemisphere, which is associated with darkness. Okay, so it's all a really beautiful science when you really start to understand it and really see it for yourself. So this is about understanding the language of the birds, which is the nature language, which is synonymous with green language. Okay, so this is about understanding also totemic sociology. This is the science in its pure form, and it's not only, you know, what brings humans together internally with nature, but naturally, okay? So all this science of self is about mastering the day and night, or light and dark, in equipoise, okay? So it's about raising consciousness and finding equilibrium. And these ancient sciences help us understand our deepest connection to all the celestial bodies, including the sun, the moon, the planets, and the stars, because it's a correspondence. It's also about, you know, what helps us understand our connection to the terrestrial, being Mother Earth, or the Earth Mother. It's all very, 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 very deep scientific sacred geometry. So I just wanted to show this symbol that I have overlapped on the tracing board, which is known as the point within a circle embordered by two perpendicular lines. And these two lines equal the North and South poles and the solstices, okay? And this symbol essentially helps us understand Shu as the balancer, being equilibrium, aka the spirit raised. And that is exactly what has happened to a human being that has done the internal work, you know, on the left and the right brain functions of consciousness. Okay, so they become balanced and therefore raised. That's what it's about. Now, what does it truly take to begin to make this happen? It takes care. It takes willpower, right? And care is a sacred feminine component to our drive to want to unite ourselves within. It's divine and internal in all of us. It's feminine in the nature because it takes openness and compassion and intuition and emotion and heart and time and attention. These are all largely aspects of the sacred feminine, okay, and consciousness. Now, I just wanted to show this orientation on its side as well, just to, you know, help us understand Set, you know, at the bottom and moving north into the light. Okay, so this is more of an alchemical way of understanding the south and moving into the north. Okay, so we have to understand the orientation in both ways. Now, why were the pyramids built? And, you know, a lot of people get stuck in who built the pyramids and how were the pyramids built, which are very great questions. But the ultimate question is why were they built? Because that's really the only thing that truly matters. Okay, so the stellar priest class built the pyramids not only as a robust temple for preserving the lesser and greater mysteries, which, you know, the lesser mysteries is dealing with the 7 and the 5, and it's also dealing with you know, the greater mysteries, which is dealing with the 12, okay? But it was also a way to preserve mental orientation to the earth, okay? because this is something I've been talking about the whole presentation. And once we understand the orientation to the earth through the mythology, we can really start to gain our balance back as a species. But they also built these symbolic monuments as a contingency, as a warning to future generations, because they understood the danger of dialectical polarization. Okay, they understood the dangers of, dark and light going to war with each other, and they knew that the solar material dominance comes from venerating in the day sky, east to west and west to east, in the north hemisphere. Because, again, like I said earlier, is that the stellar people started in the southern region, the southern part of Africa, the southern hemisphere of the earth. Okay, and they were venerating in the uranography, the mapping. They had an uranography mapping of the stars that they venerated in the southern circumpolar constellations in the South Pole, around the South Pole. And then what they did was they moved north, and that's where they started to recognize the equator, and they started to see the North and South Pole. And then they went north further because they recognized that going from the south in the dark, they were only going towards light, and therefore they went towards the North Pole, recognizing that the north had the circumpolar constellation of the Little Bear, which is the 7. Okay, and so they knew that there was a North Pole star that never set. Okay, and this was recognized as going from down to up, from south to north. But they venerated in the night sky. They had an uranography, a mapping of the north sky to help them stay oriented, okay, and help them understand how to evolve their sciences of the mythology. And then when they did that, they recognized that there was a danger in dialectical polarizations of, dark and light. So what they did was they created the science of Shu to bridge that, to help them understand, because it's a correspondence to our inner self, to bridge our sacred feminine energy and our sacred masculine energy together, to unite them, to wed them. Okay, so they built these pyramids to warn that if we were venerating in the night sky or in the day sky is dealing with what? It's dealing with light. It's dealing with the sun. Okay, so the sun is very, very important because it is masculine. The sun is a penetrative force. It is light. Okay, so if we're in the northern hemisphere, okay, if we're venerating more in the northern hemisphere, which is associated with light, and then we're venerating in the day sky, then we're not venerating in the night sky any longer. Okay, so this is why Christianity, or all the Abrahamic religions, essentially, especially Christianity, venerates in the day sky, because it's dealing with a solar deity. So when we started to go into when the stellar people built these pyramids, they knew that if we went too far north and we venerated in the day sky, what we were doing was creating too much of a masculine imbalance. Okay, so that was the warning from the stellar. But then when we went into the solar mythos, or the lunar and especially the solar, it became corrupted. And so the warning that they gave has, it's already passed, but it's still there. We can still realign ourselves. We can still get out of this if we recognize this imbalance of the material world, okay, being the solar. Okay, we're in a solar cult right now, and if we become conscious of this imbalance within us, we can actually do something about it. But it's about understanding that they knew that we had to put the triangle on top of the square, because triangle on top of the square is the 3 over the 4, which is spirit over material. Okay, and that's why they venerated into the northern night sky in the circumpolar constellation of the Little Bear, because it's the 7. And so the 7 is dealing with the 3 points on top of the 4 points, the 3 spiritual over the 4 material. And when we venerate in the day sky, we are subconsciously putting the square on top of the spirit. We're putting materialism on top of the spirit. So that's what we have to get back to understanding. That is the danger that they were warning against. Okay, and Douglas Martin did such a fantastic job at explaining all of this in his earlier work. And I highly recommend that you look at his work further to really investigate that. Now, the destruction of the sacred feminine is the result of what has happened since we went into venerating in the day sky, when we made the sun the most high. Okay, because that's what it's about. So for the past 70,000 plus years, at the beginning stages of the corrupted solar cult, the sacred feminine in all its forms has mostly been obliterated, lost, or occulted by the ancient and modern dark priest class, which has kept the majority of the world's human mind in a Western and Northern thought, okay, in the Northern Hemisphere with the Abrahamic religions especially, okay? So we can really start to see this, and we can really start to appreciate this and understand this if we start to orient our mind back to being balanced. And it takes a lot of work to do that, okay? So there's a lot that goes into this destruction of the sacred feminine, and there's no way that I can really go fully into it right now because of time. But I just want to make a few more points before we finish. Actually, a lot more points, but Eckhart Tolle said, if the balance between male and female energies had not been destroyed on our planet, the ego's growth would have been greatly curtailed, and we would not have declared war on nature, and we would not be so completely alienated from our being. And I agree with that. I don't necessarily agree that, the energies have been destroyed necessarily, but in our minds, they certainly have to some degree. And the materialism of the patriarchy of, this being in a more left brain dominated world, this is the ego growth. Okay. So we have to understand that, because ego is associated with the masculine energy within all of us, female or male, it doesn't matter. We all have the ego within all of us. And that is a masculine component to our brain as a survival part of our brain. It has its good parts and its bad parts. Okay. And we have to recognize, when the ego is in control, then, we have to understand this is part of the controlling the extant. Now, I really wasn't going to waste my time with this, but because it's dealing with the earth brain, I really wanted to just share this real quick. And I really hope people understand where I'm coming from with this, because this flat earth psyop, the flat earth psychological operation, is a destruction of the sacred feminine. And it is part of understanding the solar cult prison, or the solar mental patriarchal prison within all of us. And this is just to further, the flat earth psyop is to further that prison in people who have, taken to this psyop and haven't recognized what it's actually doing psychologically. So it's about subverting the mind to subconsciously remain enthralled, enslaved in materialism and patriarchy, okay, in the mind. So this man-made ideology negates sacred feminine aspects by excluding the southern hemisphere, ridding the curvature, and solely centralizing the North Pole. Okay, just remember, the sacred feminine is curvy, right? And if you flatten that, that's, that's one of the aspects that, you can't get rid of in nature. And this is Mother Earth. Mother Earth is curvy. Okay. So we have to remember that. And it's also negating the southern hemisphere. It's centralizing the North Pole, which means centralizing the patriarchy, and it's centralizing the male domination and ego. And it was a pretty sophisticated psyop. That I've been able to disprove this psyop in more than 15 or 20 different ways, and this is one of them. And this is, to me, this is the most important thing that you could recognize about this particular psychological operation. Okay, we're not flat-brained. Okay, but something that is round and flat that we should be paying attention to a lot more is the zodiacal wheel, the zodiac wheel, and the astrological science stored or distilled within it. Okay, and it's very important that we understand the astronomy and the astrology associated with it as well. Now, this is something really powerful and cool that a lot of people can try at home. And it is called the Egyptian string trick, dealing with the 3-4-5 ratio, something you can learn from the Euclid's 47th proposition, or it's also the Pythagorean theorem, part of that. Okay, but this Egyptian string trick, if you take a string, somewhere around a yard long, and you tie 12 knots equidistant from each other, and you get, 3 pegs or 3 pins, like push pins. And you once you get those knots all tied, you find the 3 in the middle. Okay, just look for the 3 in the middle and make sure there are, you have the directions, north, south, east, and west. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the 5 spaces at the top and find the end, and then you're going to make sure that there's 4 spaces at the bottom, and you're going to take both ends of the string and you're going to tie them together and pin them. You're going to pull them all the way to the west direction. And this is where the trick is revealed, or reveals, the magic happens. Okay. And the magic can only happen if all the knots are equidistant from each other, but you'll find a right angle triangle. And this is something that the ancient Egyptians, they knew how to do this trick in order to find perpendicular, the perpendicular being the horizontal and the vertical. Okay. And they did this with rope. They did this with chains. And this is the way that they built. Okay, this is what they built with. All right. So tracing out the 3-4-5 ratio is going to, doing this Egyptian string trick. This is what's going to help us understand the origins of right and wrong through geometry. So to true one's behavior, or to act correctly or right, is to symbolically adjust one's behavior to a right angle, which is made of a perfect horizontal and vertical meeting point, thus a perpendicular. Okay. It's the knowledge of how to form a square without the possibility of error, which has always been accounted for as being the highest importance in the art of building. Building, even if you're building a building like the buildings downtown in your, local city, those buildings or houses are built with this knowledge. Because if you don't build with a perfect horizontal and perpendicular, then your building is not going to have a solid foundation, and it can tip over easy or collapse or whatever, and that's not good. Now, this is very important because it is about having the knowledge of the difference between right and wrong, which is the highest importance in the art of building the life that we manifest on earth under natural law. And this is the secret of the master builder. Okay, so we have to understand that every perpendicular forms a right angle with its straight horizontal and vertical lines. We then find the primitive roots of the words right and wrong, meaning straight and crooked or oblique. So this is where we get the idea of, if someone is doing something wrong and they're stealing from someone, they're a crook or they're crooked. So it's about understanding that it's crooked or crook is associated with bad behavior, with wrong behavior. Okay. Now, this is what the emblem of truth looks like. And this is associated with Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess Ma'at, and the sacred cubit and the 24-inch gauge. And this is all dealing with ancient Masonic science or ancient Egyptian science, however you want to call it. It's all geometry too. Now, the 24-inch gauge or cubit of justice, is the hieroglyph that we see here with the straight line with the 45-degree cut at the end. And this has the phonetic value of Ma'at, which is primarily indicated that which is straight. Okay, that's what Ma'at means. And it was the name given to the instrument by which the work of every craftsman, every builder, was kept straight and governed. Therefore, was bound to the Egyptian word Ma'at. The square or right angle as an emblem is geometrical and not mechanical in its origin, and it dates back to the ancient Egyptians, in whose solemn processions the priest class carried the cubit of justice, by which perpendiculars, right angles, and squares might be laid out, and its form being that of one arm of a square, with the inner end cut to a 45-degree angle, which is half of a right angle. Okay, so this is half of a Masonic square. So the square was an emblem of moral uprightness, because being a right angle, it deviated in no respect from a true horizontal joined to a perfect perpendicular. Okay, so it's all about our behavior, and even think about Ma'at, who weighs the feather against the heart. The feather represents light. So if the heart isn't light or as light as the feather, then you can't pass through the underworld. Okay, and that means, not being moral, not being straight, because it creates an unstraight line in the scales. Okay. Now, this is really, really awesome, especially for the student who has studied these tracing boards. You will notice that the ancient Egyptian string trick, or the 3-4-5 ratio triangle, the right angle triangle, actually fits it's encrypted in Josiah Bowring's first degree tracing board in Solomon's Temple. And this is the cornerstone of Freemasonry. But you can see that the 3 initiates are part of the 5 spaces in the right angle triangle, going from darkness at the bottom to light at the top, and the light at the top is where the 5 and the 3 meet. And then the right angle is created at the lunar side of this tracing board. And that is very crucial to understand, because this is about understanding where to find the 7 in this tracing board. Now, there's 2 7s in this tracing board. One is reverse, which I'll let you find. And the other one is what I'm trying to get at here, is to help us understand, because the G in esoteric Freemasonry, it stands for a lot of things, but you can find it in this tracing board by understanding the phonetic value, okay? Because it's about understanding that the lunar has the moon that you see, the crescent moon, is the C. It's a symbol of C. And it also has the 7 stars around it, which are the 7 stars of Pleiades, which are the 7 sisters. But this, and this is a feminine aspect, but it's about understanding that this is the corner that where the 3 and the 4 come together. Okay, so those 7 stars are the 3 and the 4 together. This is about the reflection of the 7 of the all-seeing eye, which is the circumpolar constellation of the Little Bear, which is the 7 stars. Okay, so this is the G, because it's about the C and the 7, because it's about seeing the 7. Okay, that is the G symbol. The G, the capital letter G, is the C and the 7 combined. Okay, so that is why we have to understand this with this 3-4-5 ratio. Okay, and it's a very beautiful encrypted science. And if anybody really truly sees it, so much is going to open up for you, and you're really going to appreciate and be able to go further back into the lunar mythos, especially. Okay, but it also helps us understand the stellar, because the stellar is passed down in the lunar and into the solar. So I want to show this real quick. Now, the ancient Egyptian mythos is made of the 3 hero cults distilled into this one emblem of the 3-4-5, the Egyptian string trick. Okay, and it's a very beautiful science because the 3 hero cults are the solar, the stellar, and the lunar. And the stellar is dealing with the 5. Okay, and this is what's going to help us understand Osiris, the ancient god Osiris, the Neter god, as the number 5, associated with the number 5. And this took place, the stellar mythos took place some 300,000 to 150,000 years ago. Okay. And the lunar is dealing with the 7. And the 7 is holding the 5. It supports the 5, but it's holding the stellar mythos within it. And this took place 150,000 to 100,000 years ago. Okay. And then the solar mythos lasted 100,000 years ago up until now. Okay. And this is the 12 knots represent the 12 greater mysteries, which encapsulates the whole emblem that we see here. Okay. And it's very, very beautiful. It's very important. And it's what's going to help us find equipoise within ourselves. Now, natural law, the L in natural law, the reason that the L is uppercase is because and this can be, this is demonstrated, this is as simple as I'm going to make it, is that the 3, the spiritual, always goes on top of the 4, or on top of the material. Okay, so we have the 3 spaces and the 4 spaces. Okay, and so once we understand these, the 3 over the 4, this is triangle on top of the square. Okay, this is what builds a perfect temple within. Okay, this is what builds a balanced temple within. Now, this 7 comes first before the letter L, because, you're dealing with the G. The G comes first before the capital letter L, and the numerical value of the capital letter L is 12. And 12 is the what encapsulates all of the hero cults, and all 3 of the solar, lunar, and stellar cults into one emblem. Okay, so man's law is the reason man's law is lowercase l law, because it's materialism. It's dealing with the 4. Okay, so we have to understand that if 4 is on top, if man's law is above the spirit, that's what we get. We get man's law as a result. So if we want to live free from man's law, we're going to have to bring our spirit. We're going to have to put that triangle on top of the square, each and every one of us. Well, at least most of us. Okay, because a lot of us, we're too rooted in our ego, and we're not going to go without an enormous fight. And that's probably what it's going to take. And I don't want it to go there. I want people to just become conscious and get back to balance and get back to harmony with nature. That's what I want. I don't want it to have to go to war. War hasn't really solved much, maybe for short amounts of time, but that's never going to amount to any kind of evolution in the human species. But this is what is going to evolve us, is the internal wedding. Okay, this is what helps unite the world. Each and every one of us really has to take our internal wedding more serious, and it's what's going to help us really truly find agape and really truly find love. And this is what it's going to take: care. Care is what it's going to take. And I have given you a lot of my care today. I have shown you where the care really is. Truly, if you really want to realign yourself, this is what it's going to take. And there is the green in the middle, the heart, and the key. Okay, the key to all of this. And, this is a symbolic way that we can understand this. And symbolism is what's going to help us restore not only care, but balance and spirit in the world. It is truly the equilibrium to find care. The true enemies on planet Earth are ignorance, laziness, and apathy. Conquer them and watch the divide in you and the world dissolve. Thank you.